said. Whoops.
Whoops.
Whoops. So real quick, the last topic that I want to touch on, and Tori, this is one you and I kind of go back and forth on a little bit. We've had this conversation over over a few drinks, in the past before. I've posted about this on LinkedIn, right? Especially, when we look across the endpoint detection response, or the EDR industry. And I saved this one especially for you. I called up literally all my friends in the endpoint detection business, and you were the only one with the courage who wanted to come on here and talk to me about it. So I appreciate you for that. But last week, we saw Qualys, which typically has only played in the vulnerability management space. Whereby they go out and scan websites and servers and things like that and provide a report on vulnerabilities out there. We saw Qualys actually step into that EDR, that endpoint detection response space, with the launch of their Qualys Cloud Platform to EDR. And there was an entire amount of fanfare around this, and they released it at several of the showcases and conferences that they participated in, and again, without speaking specifically about comparing Qualys to any of the other EDR vendors that are out there, I want to go back to what I said probably a month ago when I did that LinkedIn article, Tori, which is there a commoditization of EDR that's happening in the market space?
So in fairness, I know that Neil loves using the word commodity. So I did look it up. I looked up the definition.
You had to look it up? Why did you tell people
well,
that?
No. I know. Because so I was like, well, I know what commodity means, and then I'm like, I want the actual definition. And as it turns out, of course, it's going to help me. So it's an instant of the good is equivalent or nearly so, with no regard to who produced it.
Mm-hmm.
So in my opinion, as it relates to EDR, I think there's two factors.
Okay.
Just like with any technology, it does matter who produces it, right? It does, right? Oracle, Salesforce, right? Like, I mean, you might like one better than the other, but they are not the same thing. They don't work the same. They're not the same, right? So I think that's, if we say EDR is commoditized, I think it's just important to, just because somebody makes it doesn't mean that it operates equivalently, right? I think that.
Well, no, isn't that like saying that, and I don't mean to interrupt you on that one. I thought I caught a breath in there.
Please interrupt.
Oh my gosh. But isn't that, and again, you and I will probably never be in this boat, but just to kind of throw this out there, right? But isn't that like saying that like there's no difference between buying a Lamborghini and buying a Ferrari? Like if you're not in that club where you can utilize the power of those machines side by side, wouldn't you just look at those cars and say, yeah, they're both awesome, they both drive really, really fast, and they both look really, really awesome? Isn't that the definition of commoditization?
So I would say that that's what I would call the other side, right? Which is, if we're going to call EDR, like, EDR's a solution in a stack of solutions that can help secure an environment. There's many other solutions around that, I would say, but if we're just going to talk about endpoint EDR, right? So we're not going to talk about network security or anything else like that. I mean, I think that it's the commodity aspect of it is it's way beyond just EDR. If you're only doing EDR, I don't think that's the whole picture. Just my personal opinion on that. I think that's number one. I think number two is, to your point about the Lamborghini or the Ferrari, is there still are not a lot of folks, businesses, full-blown using an EDR capability, right? And so I think EDR wouldn't be equivalent to a Ferrari. I think EDR is equivalent to driving. It's part of the car, right? I would say that in order to be successful or have a good program, you need visibility. That's what EDR would give you. So they're all not made the same, and I would say it's way more than just EDR.
So I think the problem that I have with the argument of they're not all made the same, right, is just because somebody uses one ingredient over another, or just because somebody packages one front end over another, if we consider the functionality of EDR to be visibility, right? You have visibility into the processes, into the inner workings of a machine for the purposes of looking for threats, even if we just keep it at the very, very high level of that. Then how a company does that is it your belief, your personal belief, then it's the fact that every company does it differently that makes it not commodity.
Correct.
So
there's a reason why when there's a breach and publicly they will say, well, we had the tools. So what were you doing with the tools? Right? How easy is it to roll out? How easy is it to scale? How efficient is it? How easy is it to upgrade, modify, control, right? Those are all parts of, if EDR is the car, but the wheel doesn't turn, because, right? You've got EDR, but it can't turn the wheel. If I can't get it rolled out, if I can't scale it quickly, make changes fast, right? I mean, I would say that's, one of the biggest issues is that in the industry, not even talking about specific products here, is just upgrades, keeping stuff up to date. How do I get it, how do I get it rolled out quickly? I mean, rollouts, right, right? So that's important. That's really important when you talk about the commodity.
Does when I wrote that article, a month or so ago, it was because somebody had released an open sourced EDR. For those listening who may not know what open source is, right? It's publicly available code. You can go see the source code. You can see how everything is written, and you can basically take that code and then you can use it as is. You can modify it to do something better. Do whatever it is that you want with that code. I think when I wrote that article, where my head was at, right, was, we've seen lots of companies do EDR. But we've seen a lot of different companies. We're not going to get into the different companies and things like that do EDR. But I think with the release of an open source EDR, that's where I really start to believe heavily that EDR is becoming commoditized, is because people are now having open source code for here's how you do EDR. They're telling you how to build that Ferrari or how to build that Lamborghini. And so I guess, does it change your perspective at all to know that the recipe is out there and everybody can do their own version of the cake? Does that make it more or less commoditized for you in your mind?
Well, I think if everybody has a huge staff of Neils, then yeah, it probably would be commoditized, but they don't. There aren't huge staffs of Neils sitting around, waiting to figure out how to use open source EDR. I mean, right. And I think that goes back to the scalability, right? That really scalability, efficiencies. How do I make myself more productive? Because there's a massive staff shortage, right? I think we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, but I mean, so a tool has to be easy enough for a non-Neil to be able to figure out and implement and make actually work. Not just I flip the check the box and it's loaded, right? But like it's
got EDR
and it's working. I got it, right? So no, okay. I don't think that doesn't. Yeah, no, I don't. Okay. I think there aren't bunches of Neils sitting around. That's the problem. If there were,
that'd be
that
scary.
Would be scary too.
That'd be scary. So we
that would also be scary.
So we do have one. This one I'm gonna redirect this one to you first, Tori. So make sure you're listening this time.
Okay, I'm gonna try to listen.
All right.
So my water.
Take a sip of your water while I talk this one out. Okay. So this one looks like it's in regards to EDR. It says. It is the next big antivirus. The story now is that AV is worthless. Now you need EDR to stop baddies. For EDR, you want the EDR provider to know how attackers work and be constantly adapting their EDR products to detect new attacks and malicious behaviors. Qualys knows vulnerabilities, but do they actually know the mind of an attacker? I don't know if you want to speak specifically to Qualys, but if you want to talk about kind of that inference about how EDR as a technology, utilizes threat intelligence to kind of do that behavior analysis and adapting to TDPs. I don't know if you want to kind of key in on that from your experience in your space.
So when I was talking, I feel like this was a little softball, whoever said that, because when I
Is
was
that Jeff? Is that Jeff hanging out in Chad?
Is that Jeff? Thank you. No, so when I was saying earlier, it's well beyond AV and EDR, right? So I think it has to do with other technologies as well. So I think it's prudent to, and I won't go into that, but I think it's prudent to layer other technologies. But what I think is really prudent is working with a company that understands the adversary, right? And if you don't understand the adversary and how the adversary is constantly changing, you can't fine tune the tool to do what it needs to do and constantly change, right? And again, I'm not questioning Qualys, or maybe Qualys has an enormous staff of threat intel folks, but I will say that I think that is critical to the ultimate success of being able to pivot and change solutioning, not products. You can call it EDR still, but what's kind of the man behind the curtain, and a lot of that is just strictly intelligence.
Is it then, is the value of EDR then the value of the people who can provide that analyzed intelligence and convert that into digital algorithms for a product?
I think it's part that, and then I think it's part instrumentation, right? How do you use it? How can you take it, right? Because it could be the smartest whatever wizards and all the threat intel people in the world, but if I can't implement it because it was too hard to implement, it doesn't really matter, right? So I think it's probably 60-40. I don't know. That's swag there.
that's a guess. That's guesswork on
that. There's a swag. Noting again that I am not a threat intelligence analyst, by the way.